What if your loneliness wasn't proof of your weakness, but a test of your strength? What if being alone wasn't a curse, but an invitation to build something unshakable inside you? And what if a man born into slavery, stripped of everything, except his mind, could teach you how to become untouchable? This is not just a lesson in philosophy. This is a blueprint for freedom, freedom from the fear of solitude, freedom from the ache of disconnection, freedom from the quiet lies we tell ourselves when no one is watching. This is the teaching of Epictetus, a man who had no wealth, no status, no freedom of body. And yet he became one of the most powerful minds in history. Why? Because he understood one thing, that real power is internal, that your mind, not your circumstances, is your fortress, that your judgment, not your loneliness, is what wounds you, and that when you master yourself, you become untouchable. Imagine Epictetus sitting in a small room, his body limited but his mind expansive. Students gather at his feet, not because he offers comfort, but because he offers clarity. He speaks not in poetry, but in truth, not in decoration, but in direction, and he says, "No man is free who is not master of himself." This is where we begin, because loneliness in its rawest form is not the absence of others. It's the absence of connection to ourselves. And Epictetus would tell you plainly and without pity, if you are suffering, it is because you believe something false. False about your worth, false about your needs, false about what it means to be alone. He would not hand you a warm blanket. He would hand you a mirror, and in that mirror you would see not a victim but a builder, a mind capable of design, a heart capable of resilience, a soul capable of stillness. He would teach you that loneliness is a story you're telling yourself, that I am unloved is not a fact, it is a belief, that I am alone is not suffering, it is space, that I can't do this is not reality, it is resistance, and resistance can be examined, and examined it can be changed, and changed it becomes freedom. This is how Epictetus lived. With nothing, he found everything. With no possessions, he discovered power. With no friends beside him, he became a fortress. But how? By focusing only on what he could control. He asked, moment by moment, is this within my power? If yes, he acted. If no, he let go. And loneliness? Loneliness is half perception, half reaction. Most of us aren't suffering because we are alone. We are suffering because we believe aloneness is failure. But the Stoics knew better. They knew that some of the most profound transformations happen in silence, in stillness, in the spaces where the world is no longer distracting you, and you finally have to meet yourself. That's where the fortress begins. Not with walls, not with defenses, but with truth. And the first truth is this: you are not your feelings. You are not your sadness. You are not your craving for connection. You are the one witnessing all of it. And if you can witness, you can lead. If you can lead, you can build. If you can build, you can become a place where peace lives, independent of who comes or goes. That's the power of Stoicism. That's the gift of Epictetus. That's the work of becoming a fortress untouched by loneliness. Now imagine this. You are sitting in your room, the light dim, the phone silent. Hours stretch longer than they should. Your thoughts swirl like shadows on the walls. You reach for distraction, but you stop. You remember Epictetus. You remember his voice, calm, grounded, unshaken. And you whisper to yourself, what is within my control? That one question cuts through the fog. It pulls you back into power. You realize you cannot control who texts you back. You cannot control who stays or leaves. You cannot control the rhythms of the world outside, but you can control your focus. You can control your breath. You can control the story you tell yourself about this moment. And here's the truth. Epictetus knew there is no suffering greater than the suffering we invent. The stories we loop, the meanings we project, the comparisons we let poison our peace. He would say, it's not things that upset us, but our judgments about them. And loneliness. Loneliness is judgment in disguise. I'm alone, therefore I'm unworthy. I'm isolated, therefore I'm broken. I'm not needed, therefore I have no value. But pause. Is that true? Or is it just unchecked thought? Epictetus would hand you a simple tool. Distinguish between what is up to you and what is not. If your loneliness is being fueled by the behavior of others, step back. That is not yours. If your mind is filled with what-ifs, regrets, or imagined conversations, pause. That is not the present moment. If your body is tight with fear, shame, or longing, breathe. That is sensation, not sentence. This is the art of Stoic self-possession, to see clearly, feel fully, and respond wisely. And to respond wisely, you must slow down enough to hear the voice underneath the panic. That voice says, I am still here. I am still breathing. I still belong to myself. It doesn't matter who left. It doesn't matter who forgot you. It doesn't matter how long it's been since you were held, heard, or chosen. What matters is this. You are still sovereign over your mind. Epictetus believed this with every fiber of his being. Even as a slave, even after being beaten, even after watching others fall apart, he remained centered. Not because he didn't feel, but because he practiced. Practice. That's the word we forget. Being a fortress doesn't mean being emotionless. It means being disciplined. It means returning again and again to the inner space where no one else's opinion has power, where no memory can define you, where no fear can run the show. You don't get there in one day, but every moment you choose to return to yourself is a brick in that fortress. Every breath you take instead of reacting, every time you sit in silence instead of seeking distraction, every moment you observe instead of judge, that's the work. Quiet, invisible, transformative, and slowly the fortress grows, not hard like stone, but strong like presence, so that when the next wave of loneliness comes, it doesn't knock you down. It reminds you, ah yes, here is another chance to practice, and you welcome it. You sit with it, you let it speak, but you don't believe everything it says, because you are no longer a servant to loneliness. You are its teacher. There is a moment when solitude stops, feeling like silence, and starts feeling like space. Not the empty kind, the sacred kind. The kind that makes room for something real to emerge. The kind Epictetus knew well, because it was all he had. Born into slavery, raised without a father, crippled in youth. He didn't get to choose comfort, but he did choose clarity. He chose to treat every limitation not as a prison, but as a classroom. And loneliness. It was one of his greatest teachers. He didn't say, this shouldn't be happening to me. He didn't say, I need someone to rescue me. He asked, what is this moment here to teach? That is Stoicism in its purest form. Not the avoidance of pain, but the ability to stay awake inside it. To look at the discomfort and say, I see you, and I'm still here. Because the fortress Epictetus built wasn't made of walls. It was made of awareness. He trained his mind not to escape pain, but to examine it. Not to deny emotion, but to master response. He once said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Why? Because the path to wisdom requires solitude. It requires walking alone while others misunderstand you. It requires sitting in the quiet while others perform for applause. And yes, that can be lonely, but only at first. Eventually you realize that what you mistook for loneliness was actually detox. Detox from the noise. Detox from external validation. Detox from dependency. It's only painful because we've forgotten what real presence feels like. Because we've become addicted to being seen, even when we haven't seen ourselves. But Epictetus would remind you, you don't need more attention. You need more attention. To yourself, to your breath, to your values, to the places inside you that still believe you're unworthy unless someone chooses you. Because what is that if not enslavement? And Epictetus was not interested in any kind of slavery. Not to rulers, not to public opinion, not to fear. He believed in inner freedom, and he built it through solitude. So how do you do the same? Start with observation. Next time you feel lonely, pause. Notice your first reaction. Is it to reach for your phone? To escape into entertainment? To numb, scroll, distract? Don't judge, just notice. And then ask, what is this moment asking of me? What am I afraid will happen if I just sit here and feel this? That's where the fortress starts. Not by pushing loneliness away, but by welcoming it with eyes open. Because the only thing worse than being alone is fearing it. But once you stop fearing it, you become powerful. Why? Because now your peace is no longer held hostage by circumstance. It's yours, you carry it. And if someone enters your life, it's not to fill a hole. It's to walk beside you, with no chains, no clutching, no confusion. That kind of connection. It's only possible when you've done the work alone first. That's why Epictetus didn't just survive isolation. He thrived in it. He knew something most never learn. To be untouchable, you must first be unafraid of yourself, and that begins in solitude. There's something sacred about a person who no longer fears their own company. They don't fidget in silence. They don't rush to fill gaps in conversation. They don't panic when the room grows quiet, or when no one answers the call. They wait. They breathe, they listen, not to noise, but to truth. Epictetus would tell you this is not some magical state reserved for monks and philosophers. It's a practice, a choice, a discipline. One built moment by moment, not with grand declarations, but with small refusals. You refuse to abandon yourself. You refuse to numb out just because discomfort arises. You refuse to pretend that connection, at any cost, is better than self-respect. That is Stoic solitude, not detachment but alignment, because you're no longer running from the ache. You're sitting with it. And in that sitting, you're discovering something extraordinary. The ache is not just pain, it's instruction. It's a message from the parts of you that have gone unheard for too long. The part of you that says, I'm tired of pretending. The part that says, I want peace more than I want attention. The part that whispers, maybe, just maybe, I'm enough, even when no one else sees me. Epictetus would urge you to hear that voice, to turn toward it, to let it rise. He would. Self-sufficiency, freedom is the only worthy pursuit, and freedom begins in the mind. But to be free in your mind, you must first unclench your heart. And unclenching takes time, it takes patience. It takes practice to sit through a lonely evening without turning it into a story of rejection. It takes strength to feel the emptiness and not rush to fill it with noise, screens, food, or fantasy. And yes, it takes wisdom to know that just because you're alone doesn't mean you're abandoned. In fact, many are never truly with themselves, even in a crowd. They talk, they smile, they post, they perform, but they don't know who they are when it all stops, when the lights go out, when the silence falls. That's the moment the Stoics lived for, because it's in that moment you meet the truth, the self beneath the roles, the presence beneath the performance, the peace that only comes when there is nothing left to prove. And once you've tasted that peace, you don't crave attention the same way, you don't beg for love, you don't settle for chaos, you don't chase validation like a thirst that never ends. You walk slower, you speak with weight, you move like someone who carries their own anchor, and suddenly people notice. Not because you're louder, but because you're still. Not because you demand, but because you radiate. This is the paradox of Stoicism. The quieter you become, the more power you hold, because your peace is no longer fragile, it's forged. And that is what it means to be a fortress untouched by loneliness, not because you never feel the ache, but because you no longer fear it. You welcome it. You let it pass through, and when it does, it leaves you stronger, not harder, but deeper. So the next time the room is quiet, don't rush to fill it. Close your eyes, ask yourself, what part of me is rising now? Listen, breathe, answer gently. I see you, I hear you, I am still here. And in that moment, you're not just surviving loneliness, you are mastering it. Imagine this, you wake up, and for a moment, there is no urgency. The sun slips into the room slowly as if asking permission. There are no messages on your phone. No one is calling your name. And yet, you are not disturbed. You are not empty. You are not desperate. You are whole. That is the daily fruit of solitude practiced like a Stoic, not as escape but as nourishment. And Epictetus would urge you to ask yourself, what do I actually need today to feel aligned? Not liked, not admired, not validated, aligned. Because when you are aligned with your principles, loneliness cannot shake you. It may visit, but it cannot define you. It may ache, but it cannot enslave you. That is what Stoicism has always been about. liberation through mastery of the mind and loneliness. It's one of the sharpest tests of that mastery. Most people fail because they panic. They reach outward before looking inward. They believe the silence is a problem to solve, not a place to explore. And that belief, unchecked, keeps them in chains. But the Stoic sees through the illusion. The Stoic says, "I will not flee this feeling. I will sit with it. I will know it. I will let it burn away everything false. Because in that fire, the fortress is forged. The false friends fall away." The old addictions reveal themselves. The ego's story begins to unravel. I need someone, I need praise, I need to be needed. But do you? Do you need others to witness your worth before you claim it yourself? Do you need constant companionship to feel real, or have you simply never been taught how to be with yourself? Epictetus teaches you by example. He sat with pain, he sat with silence, he sat with rejection, and none of it owned him, because he made one decision that changed everything. I will not let the external dictate my internal, not the rejection, not the absence, not the loneliness. And that's the line that shifts everything. I am still here and I get to choose how I respond. That is the fortress, not made of arrogance but of awareness, not isolation but independence, not suppression but sacred space. And when you live from that place, you don't need to explain yourself anymore. You don't need to prove yourself. You don't need to edit your personality just to feel safe. You just are quiet, present, unshakable. And here's the beauty. From that state, connection becomes real again. Because now, it's not about escape. It's about resonance. You're not clinging to people. You're inviting them. You're not manipulating attention. You're magnetizing it through presence, not performance. That's the kind of power no one can take from you. Not rejection, not abandonment, not the cruel winds of the world, because you've built your peace from within, brick by brick, word by word, breath by breath, just like Epictetus did. And now, so can you. Now take one final look at yourself, not in a mirror, but in the space that silence has carved out within you. What do you see? Do you still see someone broken by loneliness? Or do you now see someone building through it? Do you still feel haunted by the quiet? Or have you started to hear something in it? A voice, a clarity, a rhythm that belongs only to you. This is what Epictetus wanted for you. Not perfection, not isolation for its own sake, but inner command. A way of walking through the world where your emotions don't own you and your fears don't speak louder than your reason. He didn't promise ease, he promised resilience. And in the quiet, that's what you've been building. Brick by brick, choice by choice, silence by silence. You've been returning to yourself in the most courageous way, not with distraction but with presence, not with desperate words, but with a breath that says, I trust myself now. That's rare, because the truth is, very few people will ever sit long enough with their own loneliness to let it teach them. Most run, most numb, most chase crowds, and in doing so, forget their own voice, but not you. You stayed, you listened, and in that listening, you became something the world desperately needs, a soul that isn't afraid to be with itself. That kind of soul becomes an anchor to others, not by fixing, not by performing, but by simply being whole. The Stoics knew this. They didn't build their fortresses to keep people out. They built them to stay steady when people left, because people will leave. That's part of life, some by choice, some by distance, some by death. And if your peace depends on their presence, then you'll spend your life chasing shadows. But if your peace is built inward, like Epictetus's, then you will remain unmoved, even as the tides change. You will remain kind. You will remain clear. You will remain unshaken. So ask yourself now, can I be my own companion? Can I sit in the silence and still feel seen? Can I love others without needing them to hold me together? If the answer is yes, even just once, then the fortress has already begun to rise within you. And if the answer is no, then this is your invitation to pause, to breathe, to begin again, not later, not when you're stronger, now. Because strength is not something you find. It's something you build in the very moments you feel weakest, And loneliness, despite its sting, can be a sacred forge. Epictetus proved that. He lived it. And through these words, through this philosophy, he's handed you the tools to live it too. So don't run from the quiet. Let it shape you. Let it strip away what no longer serves you. Let it reveal who you've been all along. A fortress, not of stone, but of stillness. Not of walls, but of wisdom. Not untouched by life, but untouchable by despair. You are not your pain, you are not your past. You are not your loneliness. You are the one watching. You are the one choosing. You are the one free. And that freedom, it begins now. If these Stoic quotes helped you find peace in your loneliness, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. More Stoic wisdom is on the way. And leave a dot so I know you were here.